Hey guys, tonight we step softly into a shadowy realm beneath the ancient Greek world, a place where souls drift silently, secrets lurk in the darkness, and cults worship what most fear to even whisper about. Imagine yourself walking down a narrow, winding path. The air grows colder, heavier, and faint echoes of chants and faint flickers of torchlight tease your senses. You're entering the Greek underworld, the mysterious domain of Hades, a place both feared and revered. Now, just a fair warning, you probably won't survive the night here without a few sleepless jitters, so maybe keep a nightlight handy. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Oh, and don't be shy, drop your current location and local time in the comments, so we know where you're tuning in from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The ancient Greeks had a rather unsettling but fascinating vision of what happened after death. Unlike modern upbeat fantasies of fluffy clouds or eternal rest, their underworld was a sprawling, gloomy domain beneath the earth's surface, ruled by a shadowy god named Hades. Picture a vast shadow-filled kingdom where souls wandered, neither fully alive nor fully dead, waiting for their fate to unfold. This wasn't a place for happy endings. It was the final destination for most, a limbo of sorts, quiet, dark and often lonely. The Greeks weren't content to just imagine this realm from a distance. They developed entire belief systems and secret cults devoted to understanding, appeasing, or even negotiating with the forces that govern death and the afterlife. These cults flourished in the shadows of temples and caves, often hidden from the public eye because their rites were seen as disturbing or even dangerous by mainstream society. The origin of these beliefs ties deeply to Greek mythology and religious practice. Early Greek poets like Homer and Hesiod gave us vivid stories of the underworld Hades himself, the ferryman Charon, who transported souls across the River Styx, and the judges who decided the souls' destinies. But the underworld wasn't just a myth, it was a cultural reality, influencing funerary customs, social behaviour, and religious festivals. It's worth noting that not all Greeks feared the underworld equally. Some saw it as a necessary part of life's cycle, a dark mirror to the bright world above. This paradox set the stage for the cults to emerge, which often promised their followers a more favourable fate in the afterlife through secret knowledge and rituals. The idea of mystery cults started here, where initiates would be taught forbidden truths about death and rebirth, supposedly giving them power over their own destiny beyond the grave. Interestingly, scholars still debate many details about these cults. For example, did all members genuinely believe in an actual afterlife? Or were some using the rituals as a means of social or political control? Were the secret rites purely symbolic? Or did they involve actual practices like sacrifice and communion with the dead? These questions remain open and provoke lively discussion in the academic world. One fascinating detail is how the geography of Greece itself shaped these beliefs. Caves, chasms, and underground springs were seen as entrances to the underworld. Some of these locations became sacred sites for worship, where priests and initiates would conduct their rituals away from prying eyes. You can almost feel the cold, damp stones, the faint smell of earth and decay, and the flickering torchlight that would have surrounded these secret ceremonies. And while many of us today may think of the Greek underworld as just a mythological backdrop for epic tales, it was very much a lived belief system that shaped how people confronted death, memory, and the unknown. Some cults even offered hope, not the usual happy ever after, but a more personal promise of cleansing or escape from the endless shadows. So as you lay back, ready to drift into sleep, think of those ancient Greeks, huddled in dark caves, whispering prayers and secrets to gods they hoped might grant them mercy in a realm where mercy was scarce. And remember, their stories still echo through time, reminding us that beneath every culture lies a fascination with the unknown that death represents. The underworld had many faces, but none more enigmatic than the god who ruled it. Hades quiet, stern, unyielding was never quite the villain some made him out to be, but he certainly wasn't warm and fuzzy either. While his brother Zeus hurled lightning bolts and Poseidon rode the waves with flair, Hades preferred the hush of shadows and the company of the dead. And yet, people worshipped him, secretly, carefully, with trembling hands and voices barely above a whisper. You make your way down a crumbling stone staircase carved into a cliff face, each step groaning under your weight, as though disapproving of your descent. The air thickens, smelling faintly of burned herbs and damp stone. You're not just entering a temple, you're crossing a threshold into another world. This is where Hades is honoured, not with golden statues or grand processions, but with quiet. Eerie rituals passed from mouth to ear in guarded tones. Worship of Hades wasn't like worship of other gods. There were no cheerful festivals with wine and dancing, no colourful parades, and instead, there were offerings buried underground, animal sacrifices performed in the total darkness, and cryptic prayers meant to bind the soul in silence. And unlike Zeus or Apollo, Hades had very few temples. Why? Because building above ground for a god who ruled below was, well, awkward. So instead, people used caves, chasms, or deep pits. Think of it as the ancient version of meeting him on his turf. One such place was the Necromanteion of Ephra, a sanctuary of necromancy, supposedly located at the very gates of the underworld. Visitors came not to worship in the traditional sense, but to speak with the dead. That's right. Picture ancient pilgrims fasting for days, drinking narcotic potions made from poppy and henbane, and descending into labyrinthine tunnels lit by oil lamps to meet consultants who would channel their lost loved ones. Creepy. Very. Popular, surprisingly. Yes. The rituals here weren't all smoke and mirrors. Or maybe they were. Historians still can't agree whether these events involved genuine belief in communication with the dead, or whether it was all clever illusion and performance. What they do agree on is this: the experience was intense, emotional, and often terrifying. One little-known fact: participants would sometimes walk in backwards to confuse the spirits, because if you didn't, a ghost might just follow you home. That's not exactly something you want lingering near your bedroom at night, is it? Even more mysterious were the initiations into the cults of Hades. These weren't open ceremonies. You had to be chosen, and once you were in, you were sworn to secrecy. Breaking that vow could mean ostracism or worse. Some stories suggest initiates were made to symbolically die, lying in the tomb-like enclosures in total silence for hours before being reborn into the cult. Was it a metaphor for enlightenment, a psychological trick, or just really dedicated role-playing? It's hard to tell. But what is clear is that followers didn't see Hades as evil, just necessary. He wasn't out to punish the living, he simply kept balance. Someone had to manage the dead. After all, it's a dirty job. But someone's got to do it. The Eleusinian Mysteries, arguably the most famous of all Greek religious rites, also brushed shoulders with Hades worship. Though primarily centred around Demeter and Persephone, we'll get to them soon. Hades' role as the keeper of the underworld meant his presence loomed large. These ceremonies included ritual fasting, sacred dances, and night-long vigils, all designed to prepare the soul for its journey beyond life. And while details are murky, thanks to the whole oaths of silence thing, we do know this initiates came away changed, whether from psychological transformation or intense peer pressure. People genuinely believed they had glimpsed a truth beyond the veil. Some described a bright light, others a great stillness, a few total darkness and peace. The ancient world held the underworld cults in a strange tension. On one hand, they were feared accused of necromancy, secret sacrifices, and strange rites. On the other, they were respected. Even the mighty sought their wisdom when death loomed. Greek playwrights hinted at their power. Philosophers danced around their doctrines, but always they were whispered about, never shouted. Today, we might compare it to visiting a haunted house run by monks, equal parts reverence and dread. And here's a fun tidbit. Some coins found in ancient graves were marked not just for Charon's Ferry Fair, but with inscriptions like for Hades or to the Lord below, suggesting a deeply personal offering, a tip for the boatman and the boss, just in case. So, as you curl beneath your blanket tonight, think of those initiates wrapped in woolen cloaks, clutching their offerings as they stood before the cave's mouth, unsure of what lay beyond, but certain that something was there, waiting, somewhere far beneath your feet. Hades listens. If the underworld had a queen, her name was Persephone, and unlike many Greek goddesses, her story is not one of simple beauty or warlike triumph. No. Her tale dances on the edge of grief and growth, of captivity and power. You move now through a shadowed orchard, trees heavy with fruit you dare not name, beneath your feet. The soil pulses faintly, as if remembering every footstep ever taken here. Somewhere ahead, Persephone waits half light, half dark. You may know the basic story. Persephone, daughter of Demeter, was picking flowers when the ground opened up beneath her, and Hades carried her away to the underworld. It's been told like a romantic tragedy, a kidnapping, or even a divine negotiation gone wrong. But her story doesn't end at abduction. It evolves into ritual, power, and something far more unsettling, the foundation for one of Greece's most secretive and enduring cults. Persephone became queen of the underworld, ruling beside Hades for part of each year, the other part. She returned to her mother, bringing spring in her wake. This duality, life above, death below, made her the perfect symbol for cults interested in death, rebirth, and the cycle of the soul. She wasn't just a victim, she was a guide. Imagine walking into a torch-lit chamber deep underground, where robed figures chant softly in a circle. In the centre lies a figure veiled in black and crowned with poppy flowers, Persephone, embodied. You're told that tonight is the night of descent, the night where initiates die symbolically and are led into the secrets of death. You kneel. The chanting grows louder. You're not afraid, exactly, but your heart pounds in that rhythm only fear and wonder can produce. In these cults, Persephone wasn't a passive figure. She was the key to salvation. Her dual role as life-giver and death queen made her central to the belief that death was not an end, but a passage, and her worshippers believed that by aligning with her, they too could be reborn, or at least not be lost in the grey fields of the underworld's forgotten. These beliefs took root especially in the Eleusinian Mysteries, where Persephone's return to the surface was celebrated as a metaphor for hope beyond death. But in the darker, more secluded cults, the focus was on her role below, the part of her that had power, that knew the names of the dead, and whispered in the ears of judges beneath the earth. A fun but eerie detail, initiates sometimes carried small figurines of Persephone during rituals, made of clay or bronze, with hollow eyes. These eyes weren't accidental, they were meant to see both worlds. Scholars still debate whether these figurines were meant as offerings or as talismans. Either way, it's not something you'd want on your bookshelf next to your scented candles. What complicates her story even more is how the Greeks couldn't decide if Persephone was merciful or cruel. Was she the kind queen who helped souls pass peacefully? Or was she the silent observer who watched as fate unfolded without intervention? Kach na suhok, Vantrank kai liu. She was revered more as a saviour or a jailer. But that's the thing about ancient gods, they were big on duality, low on clarity. Some sources suggest her cult involved sacred fasting, nocturnal ceremonies, and even waking dreams, where initiates would lie in the trance-like states, guided by soft chanting and narcotic incense, waiting for Persephone to appear. She would not speak, she would only look, and if you saw her, they said, Your soul would begin to remember truths it had forgotten long ago. One such ritual, rarely mentioned, involved pomegranate seeds not just because of the myth, but as part of the rite itself. Eating them represented acceptance of mortality and commitment to the path of descent. It's like signing a cosmic contract in fruit form. So next time you grab a pomegranate from the grocery store, maybe take a second before biting in just in case. Persephone's presence even extended beyond Greece, in southern Italy, in Greek-colonized cities like Locri. Archaeologists have uncovered thousands of terracotta tablets known as pinakes, depicting Persephone in underworld scenes, always seated, always watching. These weren't just art. They were votive offerings, placed by people who feared death but hoped that the queen below would remember them when their time came. The power of Persephone's image was so strong that even in later Roman times, she retained her dual identity, known as Proserpina. She was both the goddess of agriculture's renewal and the underworld's gatekeeper, a job with mixed benefits, if we're honest. And the strangest part, her story made death seem manageable, not less scary, but more familiar, like a door you'd walked through once in a dream, like a song you forgot you knew, playing faintly from a room just out of reach. So tonight, as your eyes grow heavy, imagine Persephone walking the shadowy fields, a crown of blossoms on her head, light clinging to her shoulders like mist. She doesn't speak. She doesn't need to. She is every ending and every beginning wrapped in the hush of night, waiting for your dream to arrive. You find yourself walking through a moonless forest now, the ground soft and cold beneath your bare feet. Trees twist overhead like skeletal fingers, and somewhere in the distance, you hear a slow, rhythmic sigh like a giant sleeping underground. You press on, knowing you're not alone. Not really, tonight. You're here to meet two figures who are always nearby but rarely invited in Thanatos, god of death, and Hypnos, god of sleep. They're brothers, which makes perfect sense and also absolutely terrifying. Unlike Hades, who ruled the underworld with structure and rules, Thanatos was more personal. He didn't sit on a throne. He came to you, quietly or gently, even. No scythe, no screaming banshees, just a soft hand at your shoulder, a breath at your ear. He was death itself, not the god of the underworld, but the force that brought you there. And his twin, Hypnos, was the god who hovered nearby every night you slept, brushing your eyelids with dreams and shadows. Together, they formed a duo that humans both feared and relied on. After all, death and sleep are cousins, right? Cults that centered around these figures didn't build big temples or hold loud ceremonies. Instead, they whispered. They carved symbols into stone tablets hidden behind homes. They lit candles before bed and offered prayers while half asleep. Worship was subtle, almost passive but deeply psychological. You didn't beg Thanatos not to come. You asked that when he did, he would be kind. In Greek art, Thanatos is often shown with wings, holding an extinguished torch upside down. It's not a violent image, it's sad. Still, quiet. He doesn't rush. He waits. Hypnos, meanwhile, is shown reclining, often pouring sleep from a horn, like sleep is something you can drink. Imagine that a gentle god offering you a nap from a celestial teacup. Honestly, I'd take it. But don't be fooled by their peaceful imagery. The cults that revered them took things very seriously. One odd historical detail. Initiates would sleep on sacred skins, yes. Actual animal hides placed on temple floors, hoping to receive visions from Hypnos. These dreams were thought to reveal truths about their fate, their past lives, or even divine messages from the underworld. A little intense for a bedtime story. Maybe. But hey, these people didn't have Netflix. The practice was called incubation. And it wasn't just for Hypnos. Sometimes it involved healing deities like Asclepius. But the logic was similar. Sleep opens a door, and on the other side are answers or warnings. Some even believed that Thanatos could be delayed through dream rituals if you could stay in the world of Hypnos long enough. You might dodge the hand of death entirely. Let's not forget the Oneiroi, the spirits of dreams, children of Nyx night, and siblings to Hypnos and Thanatos. They delivered specific types of dreams, true dreams, false dreams, nightmares, and prophecies in some versions. They entered through different gates, the gate of horn for true dreams and the gate of ivory for deceptive ones. Kaknasu hok vantran kai liu. These gates were symbolic metaphors, or whether people believed in actual portals in the realm of dreams. Either way, it added layers of anxiety to an already complex bedtime. One rare artifact discovered near an ancient sleeping sanctuary was a clay tablet with a carved eye closed in sleep, surrounded by a ring of stars. Below it, the faint inscription reads something like, "He came gently. I did not wake." Spooky, yes. Beautiful, also yes. These cults, like many in ancient Greece, blurred the lines between religion, medicine, and personal psychology. Dream interpretation wasn't just superstition, it was a science, an art, a therapy. People desperately wanted to understand what waited beyond the veil of consciousness, and they trusted Hypnos to guide them there. Thanatos. He was more of a final guest. There's a lesser-known myth where Hypnos puts even Zeus to sleep. That's right, this chill guy who just wants you to get a solid 8 hours managed to outsmart the king of the gods, twice, in one version. Hera bribes Hypnos to knock Zeus out so she can sabotage a Trojan war strategy. Hypnos agrees, with one condition, that he gets a cool wife out of the deal. So basically, even the god of sleep negotiated like a pro. Respect. People feared Thanatos. Of course, who wouldn't, but in some funerary inscriptions. He's thanked for arriving without pain, for bringing peace in this way. Worship of death wasn't entirely morbid. It was about preparing, accepting, and, dare I say it, relaxing into the idea that one day your soul would drift quietly into the arms of darkness. No struggle, no fire, just quiet. And there's something strangely comforting in that. Isn't there, that when your time comes, it's not a battle, it's a breath, that sleep and death are brothers, waiting side by side, offering rest in one hand and release in the other. So tonight, as you begin to feel yourself floating into that in-between space where thoughts slow and dreams rise, think of Hypnos watching from the doorway, his horn tipped, his gaze soft. Think of Thanatos a step behind, not chasing, not hurrying, just there, patient, eternal, and for now, content to wait. The path ahead darkens now, not just in light, but in mood. You've passed beyond the gentle hush of Hypnos, beyond the calm acceptance of Thanatos. What lies before you is more arcane, more obsessive, and frankly, weirder. Welcome to the Orphic cult. Imagine a group of spiritual overachievers who not only wanted to beat death, but tried to map it, ritualize it, and if possible cheat it altogether. Their roadmap, the mystical poetry of Orpheus, the mythic musician who literally walked into the underworld and tried to sing his way out, twice. You walk through a stone corridor now, narrow and echoing, lit only by flickering lamps. The air smells of old parchment and sulphur. The walls are carved with verses, some backwards, some upside down. You're entering the inner sanctum of the Orphic Mysteries, where the soul isn't just a passenger, it's a project. Orphism was part religion, part philosophy, part secret society, and its core belief that your soul was divine, trapped in a body, and condemned to reincarnate over and over again unless you figured out the cosmic cheat code. They weren't satisfied with just hoping for a good afterlife. No. Orphics wanted to escape the cycle entirely. Imagine ancient Greek Buddhism, but with more skeletons and less lotus. Their mythic founder, Orpheus, was said to have travelled into Hades to rescue his wife, Eurydice. He failed. Of course, classic tragic ending, but his journey left an impression. To the Orphics. Orpheus had seen the structure of the underworld firsthand. He knew things, and through his hymns, his followers believed they could receive hidden knowledge about the soul, the afterlife, and how to prepare for the next life like a cosmic Boy Scout. Orphic cult rituals were elaborate, secretive, and wildly symbolic. Initiates would undergo purification rites, sometimes involving days of fasting, ritual bathing, and symbolic death. One unusual practice, drinking a mixture of honey, milk, and wine while reciting sacred verses. Scholars aren't entirely sure what this drink was for nourishment, altered consciousness. Pre-game for death, Kakchen Hasu Hoc Vantran Kai Liu. These drinks were merely ceremonial, or if they had hallucinogenic properties, meant to simulate spiritual transformation. One standout feature of Orphism was its obsession with maps. Not literal maps, but poetic guides, verse-inscribed tablets, buried with the dead to help them navigate the underworld. Some of these Orphic gold tablets have been unearthed across Greece and southern Italy. They contain eerie instructions like when you reach the well beside the cypress. Don't drink from it, look for the pool of memory instead. It's like an ancient Greek version of ways for the soul. These instructions weren't just for fun. Orphics believed the soul would be interrogated after death, and only those with proper knowledge could move forward to a blessed afterlife, or escape the reincarnation cycle entirely. Step aside. Hogwarts, these guys had their own magical exam waiting beyond the grave. The Orphics also had a pretty bleak view of life. To them, being alive wasn't great. In fact, it was kind of a punishment. The body was seen as a prison for the soul, a meat cage of suffering. Joyful stuff, really, but in that gloom, they found purpose to purify the soul through right living, secret rites, and sacred knowledge. One fun but creepy Orphic myth, the origin of humanity, according to them. Humans were born from the ashes of the Titans after they were struck down by Zeus for eating the baby god Dionysus. That's right, humans, in this belief, carry a divine spark and the guilt of a divine cannibal barbecue. No wonder these people were obsessed with purification. Rituals included nocturnal gatherings in caves, soft chanting of Orphic hymns, and possibly symbolic reenactments of death and rebirth. Some evidence suggests they used mirrors or water basins for reflection during meditations, both literally and spiritually. Imagine staring into a bowl of still water at midnight, asking your soul to remember who it once was, who it could be. It's a little dramatic but undeniably poetic. Some Orphics believed that after enough incarnations and with the right rituals, you could ascend to live among the stars or reunite with divine light. Others simply hoped not to be turned into a dung beetle next time around. Goals varied, and although the Orphics were a minority, their influence rippled across centuries. Plato borrowed some of their ideas about the soul. Christian mystics echoed their themes of purification and ascent. Even now, if you've ever had a dream where someone gives you directions through a dark place, you might just be channeling Orphic vibes. So tonight, as your body drifts towards sleep and your mind slips free, remember the Orphics believed this moment, this very moment, was a rehearsal for death. Not in a grim way, but in the sense that every night, we practice letting go, practice forgetting the weight of our body, practice walking in the dark with only a fragment of light to guide us. May your sleep be deep, and may you wake with a better map. You descend once more, deeper than before, into a place where the air grows sharp and metallic. It smells like iron, like blood. The silence here is different, thick, expectant, disturbed. Welcome to the realm of sacrifice. You see, for many Greek underworld cults, it wasn't enough to chant or pray or purify. No. Some believed the gods of below required something more, tangible, something red, something warm, and whether you're squeamish or not, you've got to admit the line between devotion and horror gets very thin when knives enter the picture. Let's clarify one thing right away. Ancient Greeks sacrificed animals all the time. Cows, pigs, goats, even roosters burned, buried, or bled for the gods. It was as common as lighting a candle or saying a prayer today. But underworld cults took it a few unsettling steps further. Unlike the sky gods who love fragrant offerings on high altars, the chthonic deities, those of the earth and the dead, preferred their gifts in the ground. Literally, blood wasn't poured upward, it was drained into pits, called bophroi, sometimes dug fresh for the occasion, because, as the logic went, if you're offering something to the underworld, you send it down. This might sound like just another cultural quirk, but it had emotional weight. Imagine standing by a freshly dug pit at midnight, torchlight flickering across the soil, your breath visible in the cold. A priest raises a black goat, a symbol of Hades, and slits its throat. Blood spills into the earth. No cheering, no music. Just silence and the soft hiss of hot blood on cold stone. This isn't theatre. It's deadly serious. Most historians agree that animal sacrifice was the norm. But kakine su huk van trankai le, human sacrifice ever played a role in these cults. Mainstream Greek religion condemned it. Stories of it are rare and usually ancient, mythic, or associated with foreign barbarians, but whispers linger. There are tantalizing gaps in the record, suggestive phrases in poetry, strange graves that don't quite fit the pattern. Were these just legends? Or did some cults cross the line? One of the most chilling examples comes from a Roman account of an underground cult that supposedly reenacted the myth of Persephone's descent with live actors, and one of them didn't make it out. Was it an accident or part of the rite? No one's sure. The cult vanished soon after. Less sinister but still weird were the symbolic sacrifices. Some groups offered effigies, wicker, or clay dolls shaped like humans burned or buried as stand-ins. Others wrote their sins on tablets and drowned them in sacred springs. Some cults used wine as blood, poured into the earth in careful spirals. There's a poetic irony there, pretending to kill in order to avoid killing, but the intent was always the same. Speak to the gods in the language of death. Fun detail, chthonic rituals often required wearing black, but not just any black cloaks that had never seen daylight, garments stitched by hand, kept hidden until the ceremony. Some cults even dyed their feet or hands with ash or wine, symbolic of stepping into the land of the dead. So if you ever see someone with grape-stained toes in a hooded robe mumbling in a cave, maybe give them some space. The Eleusinian Mysteries, which we've touched on before, were generally less blood-soaked, focused more on symbolic rebirth than gore, but even they had moments of unease. One stage of the initiation took place in total darkness, with booming sounds, flashing torches, and a sudden loud cry. The queen has given birth to the holy child. It was meant to simulate death, chaos, and finally a rebirth. Effective. Definitely. A little terrifying also, yes. Meanwhile, Orphics avoided killing entirely at least. Ideally, they were vegetarians, believing in the transmigration of souls. Eating meat, they argued, might mean consuming someone's great aunt. Awkward. But even Orphics poured libations and buried objects, because even if they renounced violence, they knew the dead had to be fed. One remarkable find comes from the sanctuary at Enna, in Sicily, where Persephone was said to have vanished into the earth. Archaeologists discovered rows of burnt offerings, bones, grains, and blackened flower petals arranged in concentric circles. It wasn't just sacrifice, it was symbolic alignment, order imposed on death, a ritual mandala in ash. But let's zoom out a bit. Why all this drama? Why the blood, the secrecy, the fear? Because the ancient Greeks weren't just afraid of death, they respected it. They talked to it, and sometimes, in their desperation, they offered up a piece of themselves, not just literally, but emotionally. Sacrifice wasn't just about the victim, it was about the risk, the willingness to give. to part with comfort, to stare into the dark and say, I am not above you. I offer this, so that I may pass. It's tempting to judge these rituals through modern eyes, to see them as cruel or unnecessary. But when you strip away the strangeness, what remains is hauntingly human, people trying to bargain with the inevitable, to protect their families, to understand what comes next, to stand at the edge of the abyss and make noise, so the abyss doesn't forget them. So tonight, as your thoughts slow and your body begins its nightly surrender, imagine that you are holding a small cup of wine. You tip it toward the ground, letting a single drop fall into the earth, a symbolic offering, not of fear but of remembrance, a way of saying I see you, and I'm still here. And the darkness listens. You walk now through a field of white stones, each one marked with a name long forgotten. The wind is softer here, more sorrowful. This is the land of burial rites, the quiet conclusion to life, and the beginning of something else. The ancient Greeks didn't just toss their dead into the dirt and move on. They performed elaborate, meaningful ceremonies not only to honour the dead, but to protect the living. And beneath many of these rites was the unmistakable influence of underworld cults. You can't help but feel it. Can you that tug in your chest, as though someone is watching from just beyond the veil? In the Greek world, death was not a private affair. It was public, theatrical, structured, the moment a person passed. The prothesis began. This was the laying out of the body, cleaned, anointed, wrapped, and displayed in the home. Mourners would come, not quietly, but loudly, wailing and tearing their garments. Yes, grief was meant to be performed, but it wasn't for drama. It was to show the gods that this death mattered, and to show the dead they would not be forgotten. Next came the ekphora, a literal carrying out of the body, usually just before dawn. The procession would move slowly toward the grave, with family and sometimes hired mourners singing laments. And here's where it gets interesting. Many underworld cults insisted that specific prayers or formulas be recited, not just for comfort, but as protective spells. Some even instructed loved ones to place sacred objects on or in the body, amulets, tablets, or special coins inscribed with phrases like "Remember me to the Queen below." The most famous of these were the so-called charons, obols, small coins placed in the mouth or hand of the deceased to pay the ferryman charon for passage across the River Styx. Without it, the soul was believed to wander the shores for 100 years. One ancient author wrote that forgetting the coin was the same as locking the door behind the soul. Brutal. Also, imagine explaining that to the family budget. Burial itself was highly symbolic. Some graves were simple pits, others were elaborate tombs. But what mattered more than the architecture was the placement of objects, jewellery, broken weapons, food, even perfume bottles. These weren't sentimental tokens. They were tools, bribes or keys. One burial site in Thessaly contained a woman buried with not one, but 3 gold tablets engraved with Orphic instructions just in case the soul forgot step 2 of the cosmic escape plan. These rituals weren't static. Over time, certain families developed their own traditions. One elite group known to worship underworld deities was buried in tombs that faced west, the direction of the setting sun, symbolizing descent. Others were buried with animal bones in patterns suggesting sacrificial feasts, either real or symbolic. And yes, some graves have been found with small ceramic figures of Persephone or Hades tucked between the body's hands. Creepy, sweet, both. Kachnasu hoc van Trankai lieu. These elaborate graves were signs of genuine cult membership or just fashionable superstition. After all, death was universal, and no one wanted to get it wrong. But it's clear that beliefs in the afterlife, and specifically in cult-promoted rewards, shaped how people were buried and remembered. There's one especially haunting artifact, a small clay cup found in a child's grave, etched with the words I drank from memory's stream. And now I forget no more, according to Orphic teachings. drinking from the wrong spring in the underworld Lethe. The river of forgetfulness meant losing your identity forever, but if you could find the stream of Mnemosyne, goddess of memory, you could retain your true self and progress to a higher spiritual plane. It's a bit like an afterlife passport, if your soul studied for the test. The rituals didn't stop after burial. Family members would return to the grave on specific days, 3rd, 9th, 30th, to make offerings, pour libations, and speak the names of the dead aloud. This wasn't just mourning, it was maintenance, like paying the electric bill for the soul's connection to the living world. One surprising practice. Sometimes the bones were collected years later, cleaned, and placed in urns or family vaults. The act wasn't morbid, it was reverence, a way of making space for the next generation while keeping the old ones close. And if you think modern ancestor worship is intense, imagine cleaning Grandpa's femur by candlelight while reciting prayers to Persephone. Family bonding. These burial practices, especially among cult followers, served a dual purpose, honouring the dead and preparing the living. Children were often included in the process, not shielded from it. Death wasn't hidden. It was part of life, visible, loud, and sacred. And as strange as it may sound, many Greeks found comfort in these rites. They gave structure to grief, purpose to pain, and for those in the cults, they promised something more, that with the right words, the right actions, and perhaps a well-placed coin, you might avoid the shadowy plains of asphodel and ascend to a brighter place, Elysium, the Isles of the Blessed, or something beyond even the poet's reach. So tonight, as you lie still and quiet, think of those ancient mourners walking slowly through the dawn fog, torches in hand, singing to their loved ones, trusting that someone below is listening, someone who waits not to punish but to receive. And maybe, just maybe, those voices still echo, soft and eternal, guiding you gently through the night. You find yourself standing before a door not made of wood or stone, but of darkness. It doesn't swing or creak, it yields. Beyond it lies the mystery initiations, the secret ceremonies of the ancient Greek underworld cults, wrapped in silence, symbol, and the promise of transcendence. You step forward, no turning back now. Initiation wasn't a casual affair. You didn't just stumble into a cult like you would a local farmer's market. No. This was invitation only, sometimes requiring years of preparation. The most famous were the Eleusinian Mysteries, dedicated to Demeter and Persephone, but others less known, more obscure, offered their own paths to divine understanding. Each of them promised one thing if you endured the trials, faced the darkness, and kept the secrets. You would not fear death. The Eleusinian Mysteries were held once a year, during the month of Birdromion. Usually September, thousands would gather outside Athens, then walk in procession to Eleusis, a sacred site where Demeter was said to have mourned the abduction of her daughter, Persephone. The journey itself was symbolic, both physical and spiritual. Along the way, initiates sang, laughed, wept, and even mocked one another in ritualistic jest, because apparently, sacred enlightenment includes a little ancient Greek roasting. But that was only the beginning. Once at Eleusis, the real mystery began literally. For the next few days, initiates fasted, purified themselves, and performed complex rites, including the kykeon, a barley-based drink, thought to induce altered states. Modern scholars have speculated whether it contains psychoactive substances. Kaknahasu Hok van Trancailieu, the drink was laced with ergot, a fungus similar to LSD. If true, that would make Eleusis the first glow-stick rave in history. Inside the Telesterion, the great hall of initiation, no one but the initiated could witness the rites. Ancient sources are maddeningly vague. They describe things shown, things said, and things done, that's it. A few hints survive a sacred torch passed in silence, a reenactment of Persephone's return from the underworld. and perhaps a sudden blinding light meant to symbolize the soul's awakening. Whatever it was, it changed people. The playwright Aeschylus was almost executed for revealing too much in one of his plays. He claimed it was a coincidence. Right. But the Eleusinian Mysteries weren't the only game in town. Other cults offered different, often darker, initiations. The Dionysian Mysteries, for example, embraced chaos, wine, ecstasy, and loss of identity. Initiates would dance, scream, and sometimes simulate death and rebirth. One ritual involved wearing a fawn skin and descending into a cave. You haven't truly questioned your existence until you've been in a wine-soaked cave covered in goat hair. Orphic initiations were even more cryptic. These followers of Orpheus, the mythical poet who descended into Hades to retrieve his beloved Eurydice, believed that the soul was divine, but trapped in a cycle of rebirth. Initiation involves studying sacred hymns, memorizing underworld navigation instructions, and undergoing purification rituals. Gold tablets found in graves often include lines like "I'm a child of earth and starry heaven. I have drunk the sacred milk." No pressure. And then there were the cults of Hecate, queen of ghosts, crossroads, and torches. Her initiations were said to involve night vigils, offerings of raw food, and encounters with spectral figures. Initiates were warned, "Speak not of what you see, or suffer her wrath." Hecate's devotees often worked in liminal spaces, doorways, crossroads, caves, anywhere two worlds met. One unique detail, some initiates were tattooed. Yes, tattooed. Small symbols, often hidden on the ankle, shoulder, or back of the neck, marks not of punishment but of identity. This was your backstage pass to the afterlife club, a sign to the gods that you knew the code, the route, the rules. Initiation was also about community. You weren't alone in your beliefs. You had fellow travellers, each marked by the same secrets. Think of it like an ancient support group for people afraid of eternal oblivion, except with more incense and fewer donuts. Initiates came from all walks of life: farmers, aristocrats, poets, even women and slaves, unlike the civic religions of the city-state. Mystery cults offered a deeply personal connection to the divine, and they didn't care about your birth or status. All they asked was commitment and silence. Why all the secrecy? Part of it was reverence, the idea that sacred truths must be earned, not handed out like temple pamphlets. But part of it was practical. These were often unorthodox beliefs that conflicted with the official gods of the city. Saying the wrong thing in public could get you exiled or worse, misunderstood. One fragmentary tablet describes an initiate, emerging from the ritual and whispering, "I have seen the light in the darkness. I have walked the road of silence." That's poetic and all, but it also means you're basically forbidden from explaining anything to your curious neighbour. So, what did you guys do in their, torch stuff? And here's something peculiar: some cults included ritual laughter. Yes, laughter, at certain points. Initiates were encouraged, required to laugh, not at jokes, but at death itself. It was symbolic. You mocked the grave, stared down oblivion, and laughed. That's bold. That's Greek. That's pretty hardcore, honestly. Tonight, you can almost hear it. The chanting in a dead language, the rustle of cloaks in a torchlit chamber, the sound of your own breath as you wait for the door to open. The moment of transformation, and when it comes not as a flash, but as a hush, you feel it not in your mind, but in your bones. You are no longer just a watcher, you are an initiate now. There's something strange about forgetting who you are. Not in the "where did I leave my keys" way, but the deeper kind. The kind that peels back your identity like an onion, until all that's left is the question, who am I? Really, that's exactly the sort of unsettling unravelling the Greek underworld cults not only encouraged but cultivated, because in the realm of the dead, it wasn't your name that saved you, it was what you knew. So now, imagine you've just been buried, but surprise, that's not the end. You're not dead. Not exactly, at least not in the cultic sense, according to the Orphics. Your soul merely dropped its earthly baggage at the door and began its journey through a labyrinthine afterlife, one both perilous and awe-inspiring. The Greeks didn't imagine the afterlife as some fluffy cloud bounce house. It was a test, a gauntlet, a divine bureaucracy with riddles, passwords and wrong turns. So, good luck. Fortunately, you had a cheat sheet. Well, kind of. Orphic cultists were often buried with thin gold tablets, small enough to be placed in the mouth, on the chest, or by the thigh. These tablets contained instructions, spiritual GPS, if you will. Turn left at the cypress tree. Don't drink from the wrong spring. Tell Persephone you've been purified. These aren't metaphors. They're actual written directives, often in poetic form. One reads, I come from the pure queen of the underworld. I am parched with thirst. Give me to drink from the ever-flowing spring. Basically, it's your underworld boarding pass. Historians still puzzle over how widespread this practice was. Kashnasu hoc vantran kailu. These gold tablets were common among believers, or reserved for elite initiates. But either way, the message is clear. The journey after death required preparation and memorization, so you'd better hope you crammed before the grave. And if you made the wrong move, you might end up in the wrong neighbourhood Tartarus, not the fun after party. This was the Greek version of a cosmic detention centre, full of eternal punishment, Sisyphus rolling his boulder, Tantalus reaching for fruit he can never eat, and that one guy who showed up without memorizing his lines. Greek mythology where even the afterlife has homework. But for the initiated, the destination wasn't Tartarus, it was the Elysian fields, a place of rest and light, no torment, no sorrow, just eternal ease and blessed company. You'd lounge with heroes, sip on non-alcoholic ambrosia, and trade stories with poets who've been dead since before vowels were invented. Pretty sweet deal. Interestingly, the Greek afterlife wasn't always viewed this way. Earlier texts, like Homer's Odyssey, painted as gloomy and shadowy, everyone drifting around like ghosts at a family reunion where no one remembers your name. It's the mystery cults that start to shape a more optimistic vision, one where the soul is eternal, where knowledge is salvation, and where death is not the end, but the beginning of the real story. Which brings us to the judges in the Greek underworld. 3 figures sat in judgment over your soul: Minos, Rhadamanthus, and Aeacus. Think of them as the celestial HR department, reviewing your file. Good behaviour Elysium, bad behaviour Tartarus, weird behaviour, let's check the notes. You could appeal, of course, but it helped if you dropped the right code phrases, like I'm a child of earth and starry sky. I have kept myself pure, basically. The equivalent of I'm on the list. And what about reincarnation? Oh yes, some mystery cults believed in that too, particularly the Orphics and Pythagoreans. They saw the soul as trapped in a cycle of birth, death, and rebirth, a spiritual hamster wheel. Initiation was your way off the ride. Purify your soul, remember the secret truths, and you could break free. Enlightenment, Greek style. This belief system influenced later thinkers, including Plato, who folded Orphic ideas into his own philosophy. In the myth of he describes a soldier who dies, travels the afterlife, sees souls choosing new lives, and returns to tell the tale. Think of it as an ancient Greek flatliners minus the medical equipment. And here's a quirky fact some believe that at death. Your soul had to cross a river, usually the Acheron or the Styx. You'd need to pay Charon, the ferryman. Hence the tradition of placing a coin in the mouth of the dead. No coin, no ride. Charon doesn't do charity. It's like a toll booth, but way more existential. But some cults went further. They taught that the soul could fly. Not metaphorically, actually fly. Like a bird or a spark, it would rise above the earth, ascend through the spheres, and return to the stars from which it came. If that sounds cosmic. It's because it is. These weren't just funeral rites, they were cosmologies. Your body returned to the earth, Your soul, it went home, of course. The rituals and beliefs varied from place to place. Some initiates envisioned a descent through 7 levels. Others saw the afterlife as a mirror of life, just more refined. A few cults taught that the gods themselves had once died, travelled the underworld, and returned just as you would. Myth and mystery blurred until they became one. All this sounds elaborate, sure, but for the Greeks, it wasn't just religion, it was reassurance. Death wasn't a question mark, it was a path one paved in gold leaf, whispered prayers, and well-practiced lines. And tonight, you can feel that ancient hush again, that breathless moment before the soul speaks its first word in the next world. So when the moment comes when you find yourself standing before the judges, the rivers, and the gates, you'll know what to say. You'll know the song, and more importantly, you'll know who you really are. You are the one who remembers. Now, close your eyes, not in fear, but in reverence. You're not in a tomb, not in a lecture hall, not even in your bed anymore. You're in a different place, a twilight realm between past and dream. Memory and myth. This is the domain of the forgotten dead, those whose names are lost to history, but whose rituals and whispers still shape the very ground beneath your feet. In ancient Greece, not everyone received the careful rites, golden tablets, and secret passwords of the initiated. No, for every soul who chanted the sacred hymns, countless others passed silently into shadow. The uninitiated, the poor, the exiled. What happened to them, kaknasu hoc vantran kai lieu? These souls drifted endlessly, whether they were judged at all or if they simply vanished, swallowed by silence, and yet, even they were not wholly forgotten. Across the Greek world, small shrines dotted the countryside at crossroads, under old trees, beside wells. These were the herms, the tombs of ancestors and heroes, the offerings to chthonic deities. The underworld wasn't just a place far below, it seeped into the land, into local custom, into everyday life. To live in Greece was to live among the dead. You greeted them as neighbours. You poured wine for them at dinner. You whispered to them when you were alone. Every year, during festivals like Anthesteria, the dead were invited back. Doors were sealed with pitch. Families spoke in hushed tones, and food was left out for wandering spirits. This wasn't fear, it was etiquette. The dead weren't malicious, but they were guests, and like all guests, they expected respect. Even ordinary graves could become powerful places. If someone died violently or unjustly, they could become a revenant, a spirit unable to rest. Families might bury them with iron nails, bind their limbs, or weigh them down with stones just in case. And in certain temples, like that of Hades at Eleusis or Necromantion near the river Acheron, you could actually consult the dead. Yes, that's right, necromancy, with all its solemn theatrics. The ritual was not light-hearted. You purified yourself with water, you sacrificed animals or you fasted, and then you descended physically or symbolically into the earth. There, through trance, darkness, or intoxicating fumes, you might hear a voice, a whisper from beyond. Maybe it was a lost lover, maybe a dead king, maybe it was just your own thoughts, speaking in someone else's tone. Either way, it felt real, and often that was enough. But don't mistake this for superstition alone. These practices had structure, meaning. They were part of how people processed grief, fear, justice. To call upon the dead was to engage with memory, history, even protest. Some tomb inscriptions read like curses, others read like confessions. One anonymous slab reads, "Stranger, do not disturb my bones. I was cheated of my life and sleep poorly." Poetic and a little terrifying. In cities like Athens, laws even forbade the disturbance of certain graves. To do so was not just vandalism, it was sacrilege. Because the dead had power, not just ghostly power, but moral authority. They remembered things the living tried to forget. In fact, many mystery cults probably emerged from these older traditions, A family might venerate an ancestor who died mysteriously. Over generations, their tomb becomes a shrine, stories build, rituals form, and eventually, a god is born not from Olympus, but from the soil, from memory, from need. Take Hades, for example. He was never a flashy god. He didn't cheat on his wife or throw lightning bolts. He ruled quietly, inexorably. The Greeks didn't even like to say his name. They called him Pluton, the wealthy one, because all wealth, all life, eventually returned to him. His domain was the chthonic world, dark, fertile, silent. But silence wasn't absence. It was power. And the dead weren't trapped. In fact, they were watching, guiding. The initiated believed that after death, their souls would linger near loved ones, offering protection. Signs, warnings, a sudden breeze, a bird calling at night, a dream too vivid to forget. These were not coincidences. They were visits. You begin to see the deeper truth now. The cults weren't about escape. They were about connection between life and death, between generations, between memory and myth, the rituals, the codes, the torches. All of it was an attempt to build a bridge, so that when you finally crossed over, you wouldn't be alone. You'd be among friends, among ancestors, among those who had already made the journey and waited to welcome you home. So now, you lie back, not in fear, in peace. The veil is thinned, the night is warm and far away, beneath the earth or above the stars. A chorus of ancient voices sings, you are known, you are remembered, you are not gone. Sleep now, the mysteries have been revealed.